Okay, hello everybody, good evening, and thanks you all for coming. I really appreciate it, we all appreciate it. It's nice to see you all here. My name is Mira Ciolo, and I will be moderating the event today. I am of mixed Eurasian heritage, and I'd like us to first remind us and acknowledge that this land on which we're gathering today is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish and the Hochelaga-speaking peoples. These are the first people since time immemorial, and have a deep connection to this land and hold its stewardship, which we can learn a lot. The land itself and the life that's held in it, and those who remain stewards for its health throughout generations past and to come. We are here in building reconciliation, and I am deeply grateful to these first peoples on whose land we live, work, and play. Before I introduce tonight's program, I invite our respected elder, Hayamitse Della Rice Sylvester, to open up our meeting so we can start in a good way.
Can you see me? You guys got to make that camera go so I can see all of you. So I lit my candle. Hello, hello, no way, hello, Tia. Ayo, hello, Equa, hello, Chado, yo, no, yo, no, we call and let me cry all the day long. I drive and I see what's going on. And if you can hear that the trees and the land is crying. It's crying, and I have to stop and sing and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Not everybody is like that. Not everybody knows to think that what you're doing to the land is closing everything off. We see so much of that, and it's adding and adding and adding. And the poor plants are come creeping up through the creeks and the cracks here and there. Hello, yo, we know yo. Hello, yo. Hello, yo. Hey, Joe, no, we know. We give thanks to the grandfathers and the grandmothers for this time, for this place. We give thanks for all those who have the thought and mind of the environment, of the land, to call the land a family in itself, divided up into tribes and tribes and tribes of people. That's what the land and what is on the land is all about. Sometimes you know that when the bird or when somebody comes right in front of you like that and flies and they look at you, you know, maybe it's giving you more of a message than you even can think. They call and they cry and they say, isn't there somebody here? Who's working? Who's helping? Oops. Hello, yo. We know, yo. Hello, yo. Hajka, CMCA. Wanted me to do the opening, and that was the opening part.
Thank you very much for that beautiful opening.
I kind of got it a little bit convoluted because I was driving today, and that's how the land was with all those, all the strips of bare trees wiped out there. It's freaky.
Well, thank you for joining us virtually.
Okay.
time we'll see you in person, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gathering here today and learning on a workshop series in forest health hosted by the Shawnigan Basin Society and the BC Coalition Institute, a group of practitioners who are working at the nexus of human and environmental health and equity. The intention of this gathering is to respond to an expressed community concern about the declining health of our forests. Over the summer of 2022, when brainstorming on how we can best engage with protecting the health of our forests, asking, inviting, and building relationship with our First Nations was strongly brought up as a key piece. So the overarching aim for today is to build relationship with our First Nations, beginning by listening and understanding the First Nations perspective. So I urge you all to think of some questions of how we can address that as we move on into the discussion period later on tonight. With that, we have 4 invited respected members of the Quw'utsun and Stz'uminus nations to share their perspectives, wisdoms, and lessons with us. Ayamitse Della Rice Sylvester is a Quw'utsun elder, healer, cultural and medicine knowledge keeper in the Cowichan Valley. Her work includes being involved in nature advocacy through her lifetime, and she has worked for over 4 years with BC Wild's Leadership Initiative for the Environment and with the Pacific Networking Association, which is a group of cultural and spiritual First Nations from around the Pacific Ocean. Bella's training through her Aunt Ellen White of the Stz'uminus taught her cultural and spiritual aspects of ethnobotany. Dr. Shannon Waters is a Stz'uminus band member and medical health officer for the Cowichan Valley. Am I saying that right, Shannon? She has worked as the Director of Health Surveillance at First Nations and Inuit Health Branch and at the First Nations Health Authority as the Acting Senior Medical Officer for Vancouver Island Region. She has worked with Vancouver Island Health Authority as Medical Director and with the Ministry of Health as the Aboriginal Physician Advisor. She is currently honored to have come full circle and to be working in her home territory as the local medical health officer. So Cowichan, am I saying that right? Okay, Takuya. Close? Okay. Sarah Morales is a Quw'utsun member, Fellow of Indigenous Law, AP. She is an Associate Professor at the University of Victoria, Faculty of Law, where she teaches torts, transsystemic torts, Coast Salish law and languages, legal research, and writing and field studies. Prior to joining the faculty at the University of Victoria, she taught at the University of Ottawa, Faculty of Law, where she taught Aboriginal law, Indigenous legal traditions, and international human rights with a focus on Indigenous peoples. Sarah's research centers on Indigenous legal traditions, specifically the traditions of the Coast Salish people, Aboriginal law, and human rights. She has been active with Indigenous nations and NGOs across Canada in nation building, inherent rights recognition, and international human rights law. Qwustenuxun, say that right? Qwustenuxun Jared Williams is a Quw'utsun public educator, a chef, a food sobriety advocate, and the Elders Kitchen Manager with Cowichan Tribes. He is a storyteller and a writer, among many other things. His wisdom and stories and enthusiasm have far reach for both people online and in person. So thank you all for coming here today. So with that, we will start by hearing our 4 invited guests. Thereafter, we'll have a quick break, just a bit of housekeeping, and invite you to enjoy some of the refreshments. We'll then move to our Q&A portion for the second half of the evening, where we'll open up the floor for questions and discussion among the audience members. I've also just a couple of things. Really like to thank the Shawnigan Basin Society for arranging the space in the AV and the IT capacity that we have tonight, and also extend a special thank you to my adopted auntie, Frances Bullock, who's sitting and hiding in the back there for preparing a lot of the food that we have tonight. So, with that, I'll call upon our first speaker. I haven't placed any orders on you guys, so whichever order you want to go in, maybe we can start with Stella.
Kitchen.
The Mill Community Center, you know that?
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, who is that?
Right here?
The woman that was speaking.
Lake, I think, area, like Mill Bay, Shawnigan Lake is hosting it. So I think most of the people are from there.
Yeah, it must be good too.
You want me to bring it closer to you?
If nobody's speaking, are you guys waiting for me to speak?
Oh, my.
Yoga medicine.
Shannon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Della, maybe you can start us off.
Like I said, I kind of like already started on a roll there because I went driving up to Nanaimo and I hadn't driven that way for quite a while, right? I don't know how long ago, within the last 10 years or something, I hadn't gone to Nanaimo for quite a while. I mean, Victoria, and then I went driving down that way and that whole, when they were just stripping that whole center there on the right-hand side, right? And it was all bare. It was bare. My windows were open and I had to stop. I had to stop because the trees were crying. That's the one I was talking about. Because when I was driving up north, there's more and more stripped. I got a phone call and somebody wanted their yard to be blessed, right? And that's a great thing, but they didn't know what was going on because the trees were hanging down. The trees were hanging down. And he says, I don't know why that's like that. And then in the end, we found out that he just bought the property, cut down half a dozen trees in a row because they're on the way. And so the trees that were left didn't know if they're going to be next or not, right? Not only that, but the trees that were probably cut down were probably all the kids and grandkids, kind of like that, eh? Like, you don't think about trees and stuff like that, but that's kind of like how it is. When you take a look and you can walk in a forest and walk and look and see the oldest ones and where they're all at and who they are. I got called to Belize and I went onto the property, and as soon as I got on the property, I started singing and the singing, and I thought, oh no, the trees were going like this. So I would go to the next one that was doing that, and I went to 4 trees like that and sang that I was here, that I was happy to be here, and who I was and where I came from. And the caretaker told the medicine man after that I sang, and I went to the trees in order of their age, right? In order of their age. And so like if you look at it like that, then you've got the great grandfathers and the grandfather and the great grandmothers and the, you know, like coming all the way down, like our 7 generations, the trees think like that too. and they connect with you. And when you walk wherever you walk and you walk and you walk somewhere regularly every day, and you go, oh, you know, the tree looks so green today, or the flower, hey, look, the flower is coming out, or something like that. My son lives up the hill from me and comes running down, and he goes, oh my God, he says, I haven't come down that trail for like 3 years, right? I haven't come down the trail for like 3 years. He said, I was running down and I heard talking and I stopped. He says, and they were talking about the pink and purple flowers. He says, I said, are you guys talking about me? Are you talking about me? Because they're saying he liked this one better than this one. And how come he hadn't been that way for a long, long time, right? How come he hadn't come running down the trail like that for a long time? He says, okay, I'll share this with you guys. He says, I like you both. You come out at different times and I always like you anyways, he said. I like all flowers, just to get that off the way. and then he says, okay, what happened was I come to the bush and run down the hill. I live up the hill and I run down the hill to see my mom and do some work with my mom. And then pretty soon I got a girlfriend. I got a girlfriend. So, you know, I couldn't ask her to come running through the trail, right? And through all the bushes and everything and duck down and this way and that way. He said, so we drove here and there and we never came through the trail. Then pretty soon she got pregnant, so we had a baby. So I still couldn't come through the trail, he says. And then once we had baby, then another baby came. He says, but now the two are getting big enough, so he said, he'll start bringing the kids down through the trail. But that's like there's all kinds of things like that. Like I was running and running. Go run through the bush. Run where nobody runs. Don't be following everybody. Just make your own trail. That's the elders yelling at us, right? If I change my voice, it's somebody yelling at me. This is the grandma thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me look at you guys. Let me look at you guys. Your legs are crossed. Your legs are crossed. I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and I went, oh, yeah, right. So I crossed my legs, and Uncle comes along with a great big stick, knocks my leg off the other side. And Grandma says, in one ear and out the other. It has nowhere to stay grounded inside of you. When you have your arms crossed and your legs crossed, then everything just comes in and right out of you. That's a learning thing. That's a learning and saying. That's a thing so you don't have to say, what did she say? What did she say about this? Do you remember what she said? I can't remember what she said. Sorry, man, I seen your crossed leg. And I said, sit up straight. But you know that sit up straight, when they yelled at that, the sit up straight was so that you had the whole thought coming through you. I figured that when you're so like that with the land and you're open and you're okay, then you can hear things and then you can see things, right? Without knowing that, without really hearing or seeing that. Right? Anybody got a flashback about what I'm talking about? No, but all of those things, like somebody says, but I came from somewhere else. How can I be from this land when I came from somewhere else? And I said, well, there you are. Like my cousin, he says, oh, I brought you a whole pile of medicine, he said. And I said, where'd it come from? And he said, it was just outside my house. It was on the front porch. He said, it kept on slapping my wife in the face. He said, she needs some medicine. And I said, what kind? And he said, what kind? And what he brought me was what it was needed to make her medicine. So I used that to make her medicine. That's why, see, the plant was trying to get her attention. And the same with the rocks. When you guys walk along and you see some rocks, you go, oh, like I got all kinds of rocks. And I called a lady who can read rocks here one time, and she goes, oh my God, look at this one. It's so good for the stomach. This one's good for the stomach, she says. And I said, okay. Then the next day I got on the car and I thought, what's that rock doing on the car? Oh, for heaven's sakes. And I picked up my niece and we were going to Victoria, and she says, oh, I don't know if I was going to make it today or not. Husband can't come. What's the matter? Oh, our tummies have been off, and they've been off for like 2 weeks now, 2 or 3 weeks. They've been off. And I said, oh, so I said, grab that rock. Grab that rock that's on the floor of the car. Put it in your tummy. Put it in your tummy. Right? So she did. And then I said, now keep telling me all the stuff, all that was happening every day to you, to your husband, maybe any techniques or anything like that. So she did. Then by the time I got to Victoria, I stopped the car. I mean, I don't have a big car. It's just a little car, right? I stopped the car, and that rock fell out from her tummy. It fell out onto the bottom of onto the car and smashed into like 1,000 pieces. So I told her, I said, you have to take all that and bring it out to the land where nobody walks. And thank it, because it just gave its whole life for you. I kept on calling back to check. They never had those tummy problems again. Right? So, anyways, like all kinds of things, like when I was running through the bush where nobody else runs and making my own trail, I went, oh, there's a swamp. Oh, there's a log on the swamp. So I'm running across, I'm halfway across a log, and it's kind of like a big open space, right? I'm going through a swamp, I'm running across. And I heard something. I heard singing. And I stopped, looked around. Devil's Club. It was Devil's Club. They were singing a song that I knew. And that's what my late mother-in-law said. From the water, from the wind, from the trees, from the stones will come all those songs. That's where all the songs come from. The songs come from the land. The songs come from the environment. Maybe the whole thing in the end will be a bigness of thought, a bigness of intent to set the thought. Right? Because all of this comes way ahead, like, sorry, I have to throw this in because for some crazy reason it just jumped into my head. You know, Archie Bunker, right? Well, anyways, he calls Meathead, right? And then they're away, and Mom was talking to him, and she says, you know, when he was little, blah blah happened, and blah blah happened, and this was going on, and this was going on. And Meathead says, oh, I thought it was all because of me. And she says, no, it has nothing to do with you. That's just how he is. But us within all of our families, we know how things are, right? Like if you go outside and you go outside your door and that same tree or the same bush or whatever is there all the time and you go by it, like if you're on campus or walking out in anywhere, then you just turn around at a bush and let the bush will brush you off, right? actually, what happens is you're giving off CO2 and they're giving off O2, and you guys, that's the big exchange, right? I mean, that's the big exchange. Okay, you guys. Is there comments now?
Thank you very much.
I don't see nothing in chat.
Oh, like Mike gonna ask, you know, like I don't know how I'm gonna be able to go after you, Andy.
Well, that's all right. That's all right, because you know, well, let's see now. Jared, who's your, who, you have a Williams parent?
Yeah.
And that Williams parent is my auntie or uncle.
Yeah.
So we're cousins.
Yeah, like we were having that chat. We weren't sure.
Yeah. And that's how it is, because the baby brother to Jane's dad was my dad's mother's brother. The one that went to the States and never came back.
My okay, Shyest then. Hey.
Well, you always have to listen now.
Go ahead.
It's always really hard to try to not say anything after you. As one of the others has actually said something. So hey, hi tap. I really wanted to use this opportunity to share a song, just to really invite the ancestors in here, because we are sharing about them. We should ask them, like at least be here with us. And so I want to sing the remembrance song. Stz'uminus, Stz'uminus Quw'utsun, Stz'uminus Quw'utsun, Stz'uminus Quw'utsun, Qwustenuxun, Qwustenuxun, I chitzel lalamechen at a Qwustenuxun, Allen satani Qwustenuxun slacken, Ohata Qwustenuxun. As we just recently heard, it's all about our family, and I cannot stress that enough. And it's hard when you live within this like new world where you have we have actually like drawn a line in between us and everything else. We are humans, and so that's why we're allowed to do what we do. But I want to use these a few minutes to try to like show you how we are all one. Family, exactly as like we heard from my Shaya. So long ago, when the earth was new, they say, there was a man that we call Qw'utsun. And Qw'utsun is also renowned as a transformer. He can like change things. And so they say that if you do things that are not really very good, and Qw'utsun actually sees you, he will turn you into a rock. And there's lots of these rocks all over the valley that like others would say, oh that rock, that was a young man and he wouldn't listen. Look what happens when you don't listen. Lots of those examples everywhere. But if you were able to do something worthy, and Qw'utsun was there, he would change you, do something that would help to provide for your family, even after you had left this world. One example of that was a hunter. His name was Qwu'utsun. He was an amazing hunter, and he was able to provide all of the food that his family actually like needed, and as the years actually went on, he was able to hunt everything. And so after all these years, he's like an older man. He says, like, I have already hunted the whales and the wolves and the lions up in the mountains, all of them. So, he's there and he's asking himself, well, what else is there to hunt? And he asks himself this for years. And then he realizes, I will hunt Qw'utsun, he says. So he's out in the world and he's asking around, oh, do you know where Qw'utsun is? You know where Qw'utsun is? And they say, oh yeah, he was over there. Oh yeah, he's just over there. So he's walking. And he reaches the edge of the ocean and he sees Qw'utsun at the edge of the ocean like this in the water. And he's over there and he says, oh, there's Qw'utsun. So he like draws his two knives, and they're long, and these things made out of the shells of the mussel shells, and they're this long or so, and they're all the way out. And he says, okay, so when he's walking up to him, like all the way hushed, he's like, there's no way he knows I'm here. Walks all the way up to Health, and he lifts him up in the air, and he's just about to stab, and all of a sudden he's all the way like frozen, and he has no idea what's happening. He's there, he's trying to move around, but he can't move. And slowly Health rises, and he looks at him, and he's trying to attack Health, but he can't move. And so Health, he like says to him, "Oh, you are the best of all of the hunters here. You have looked after your family and your village for all these years, and so now I will reward you, and for the rest of existence, you will feed your family." So he was, he didn't know what was going on. Like I said, he's like this, and he looks in the water, and he sees he is the Roosevelt elk, with those, like the really eye ears, exactly like those, like two like shell knives. And so all the elders would say, if you have to go hunting an elk, that's one of your like relatives, because in like all the way like at the beginning, that was one of the members of our tribe, and everything here is like that. When the world was all the way new, there were no trees, there were no animals, and so over all these years, Health was able to like change, these noble individuals, into these creatures. One other time, like there was a man, and every time anyone within the village would require something, it was almost as if like he would already know well in advance. Like he'd be out in the woods and he'd think, oh, I have to carve a canoe. And he'd run home and he would work on his canoe and work all night and all day. And just as he was all the way done, he'd hear, he'd say, oh, inside, yeah, come inside. And they'd go, oh, I need a canoe. I have to go over here. And he'd go, oh, well, hey, I have a canoe for you. Everything anybody needed, like it was in his mind. And then it was there. And then he would hand it away. And for his whole of his life, he was always ready for things. Like if he had to go out and if like he had to go hunting, he would always ready himself on the inside. If like he had any like work to do, he would always ready him himself. And at the end of his life, he was in like inside the longhouse, and like he was he was just about to pass away. And who walks in the longhouse except for Health? He walks in the longhouse. Everybody's in there all the way around, and he says, I have been watching you. Anytime anybody needs anything, you're there. Anytime you need anything, you are even there to look after yourself. And then he says, you will look after your people long after you're not here anymore. And he turned him into the first Qw'utsun, which is our cedar tree. And if you know anything about us, we are one with our Qw'utsun. It is our canoe. It is our house. It is what we wear. It is spiritual to us. It is everything to us. So that man's name was Qwustenuxun. Now, Qwustenuxun is actually the name that my son actually like wears as it is right now. And so I have a direct relation to the Qw'utsun. And so if I'm out in the woods, exactly, you know, like you can hear them. They want you to know, but you have to know that that is your relation. Like there's no exaggeration. Everybody here, all of the ancestors here, they were one with all the trees, all of the animals, all of the fish. In our new world, we draw lines. We did not have lines like that. There were no lines where one was above the other. And so if we're out in the woods, yes, I can see the elder trees, and I can see, like the younger trees. I can see the generations, and I can see the changes, like within each of those generations. Years ago, I was out with an elder, and he said to me, "Oh, hey, son, the Qw'utsun is the sun clat, the sun clat of the trees." And I said, "Oh, what's that, Uncle?" And he says, "It's the oldest one. The sun clat is like the eldest one in the line. If you've got, like three brothers, the oldest one is your son clat." So I asked him, "Well, like who's next then, and who's next?" Because instantly I'm like, "Oh, okay, I want to know all the information." And he says, "Oh, I don't know, son." He says, "All I ever heard is this one is the oldest one." So for years I was asking elders, "Who's the next one? Who's the next one in line?" Nobody can answer me. About a year and a half ago, I ran into an elder and asked him that question, and he just began to cry. And I didn't know why. I'm like, oh, gee, Uncle, what happened?" And he starts crying. He says, "All I know is the willow is the baby." He starts crying. The baby. He says, "I never heard about, like the oldest one, only the youngest one." So after all of his years, I had accidentally handed him, this, some of the information of, the oldest. And so this one was the youngest. And I began asking again and again and again, why was this there? And one of the elders, he said, "Well, it's the way everything returns." I said, "What do you mean it returns?" He says, "Well, if everything lights on fire. Who is the first one from the ashes? He says it's the willows and the alders and the, he had all these other ones. And he says, it's always all those ones. And the last one to arrive is the Qw'utsun, the oldest one. I was having a chat with another elder, and that's what I said to him. All this stuff, I hadn't thought it was real life. He says, but this, he says, here, son, who's the one who's on their way out the door? I said, what do you mean who's going out the door? He says, what about the Qw'utsun? I said, what do you mean? He says, look at all the like red like cedar trees. I said, okay, looking, and you can see them all at the top. They're all like it, and they're all starting to like dry out. And he says, oh, the Qw'utsun is leaving. And he says, and if it leaves, who's next? I said, I don't know who's next. I've been asking who's next my whole life. He says, well, after, the Qw'utsun leaves, then all the others will leave until all you have left is the willow. And you're like, oh my goodness. The genealogy of the trees is our way of having our science, right? It's how we know everything is through our family. In scientific terms, those are trees, and so that goes. No, that's a family. Like exactly like we have a family, exactly like we heard from Mandela. And so if you were like raised with all of that information, every one of the days of your life, they'd say, that's your relative, son, all those trees. All those ones, so you have to look after them. You go visit them, and you would. She'd say, okay, you have to go over by that one over there for half an hour. You just go by that tree, and I wasn't in trouble. She just asked me, oh yeah, you go by that tree, and when you're there, you really relink with the land. If you were in one spot within the woods, if you like choose one location and you were to walk there every day at exactly the same time, you would see so much. Everything moves. You would think it doesn't move. It moves. You would see everything growing and then retreating. And you could see, like the new like generations on their way up, and the old ones on their way out. And then you can see that it's all a family, all of the plants, all of the trees. And then exactly like you hear from Auntie, or from, like my Shaya, so you're gonna get mad at me, keep calling her my Auntie now. She, when we drive and we like see where, there are no trees, it's a reminder of what happened to us. Right? There were so many of us. There were 20,000 of us. And within 100 years, there were 300 of us. 100 years, 20,000, 300. It's a lot of information. So you try to hang on to that, because that is everything. Because now, when we go into the woods and there's no trees. You're like, oh my God, I know how it feels, and you cry because you know how it feels when you like see them lighting all of all the trees that they didn't want, and they haven't they have them in big heap, and they have light it on fire every year, or whatever it is. That's what they used to do with all of our regalia. Everything that all of the trees used to wear, right? Everything, all the time. It's all hacked off, and it's all in a pile, and it's all on fire. And you actually wish that it wasn't your relative. You're angry because all of that is your family, and there's nothing you can do about it. And everywhere you look, that's what it is. Actually all the years ago when I was only this high, I walked up I used to walk in the woods all the time when I was young. And I used to imagine all of these, all of these trees were the trees that, ancestors used to walk underneath. And I would say, oh, how good are the trees? And I'd walk to them, and I used to sing to them. One day I was out there with one of the elders, and that's what I said to him. I said, oh, Uncle, look at all these trees. Look, they're all, holy mother, they're so old. They've been here for all these years, holy, the ancestors used to be with these trees. And he started laughing. He goes, no, wait, nephew, these trees aren't even 100 years old. I'm a kid. Your whole world just crumples. What do you mean 100 years? Oh, they went through and they chopped all this down. You're like, you realize, even even when you're young, that how much you're not able to realize after all these generations. You don't even really realize that we don't have real trees anymore. All these ones out here, they're all 100 years old, and then you instantly become incredibly overwhelmed with the reality that you have to hold all this information, and you have to revive the woods, all of it, as one thing, because you're all one family. And so when you ask me about the Indigenous perspective on our forests, it's exactly the same as the way I view our families. That we have to revive our language, we have to revive our ways, just like we have to revive the ecosystems and the languages, that all of those trees use with each other. We have to help. And so at least, after all these generations of all this change, we are the first generation that has a a chance, to change things, because up until now there, there hasn't been opportunities, but I'm here now, and you're here now. This would not have happened all those years ago, but it is happening now. And so we have a chance. We have to realize that, there's no lines. We're all one thing. See, let's see. So that's all I have to say. Yeah. So, that's it.
So it's really nice to be here this evening. I'm so honored and grateful to be able to speak along with people here in person and Stella virtually. I have some slides, so I think I'm just going to kind of look in your direction and nod when I want to change. So yeah, as Mira said, and you know me, but to say a little bit further, I am a physician. I'm a member of Stz'uminus First Nation and have a family ties to Cowichan Tribes as well. I'm Qwustenuxun on my mother's side and Hungarian, Swedish, and Scottish on my father's side. And I worked here in my home community as a family physician for a number of years. And I became pretty frustrated pretty early on that many of the things that people were coming to see me for, sometimes my family members, community members, were things with my Western medical training that really I only had Band-Aids to help fix. And that it was way more upstream, that the issues that came in place that made us, have many of the things with regards to our health that we're experiencing now. So I went back and did training in what's called public health and preventative medicine. And so now I work as a medical health officer in my home territory. And that has really, what I'll share with you here today is a bit of what I've learned from my Western academic training in medical school, but then also the opportunities and teachings that I've had from family members and other people here. And I also want to acknowledge that some of what I'm sharing with you here today is also things that the Qwustenuxun Treaty Group had collected over time. And so I have some visual depictions of some of that as well. So this here is a map which Qwustenuxun Treaty Group put out, and I often bring this up when I first start sharing to situate myself and who I am and acknowledge the place that has nourished me and my family, my ancestors for generations upon generations. And so this is a map that Qwustenuxun Treaty Group put together of Qwustenuxun territory. And so I live in the place known as Qwustenuxun, or Deep Bay, or otherwise known as Maple Bay. So I live there with my family, and that's where the red circle is. And today we're situated about where the red star is. And this map shows, with the different colors, different ways that we had relationship with the territory we belong to for generations. So in light blue, there's places we might have gone to harvest. Purple shows where cultural practices might have taken place. Red shows where also there's sayeth, or oral traditions as well. So this is a map which shows relationships. It's a territory, but it shows how we are connected to this place. And with I like maps and pictures, and this is a certain depiction that I've used a lot during my training, which has been very colonial. I work with an Island Health. It's a very colonial organization. And sometimes I can't see myself within it. And this is a depiction actually from the time when I worked at First Nations Health Authority.
In the field and studies that I'm doing. And so I think I'll touch briefly on those, but I would prefer to engage in a conversation with you all, and I'm cognizant of the time. And so let's just see where this takes us, but I'll try not to be too long. I have 2 young kids who traveled with me from Victoria that I should leave as close to 9 as possible, or I'll pay for it in the morning. So, as Mary said, I come to this work through a legal lens, and more specifically, a lens of Coast Salish law, thinking about specifically what does the legal tradition and legal order of the Island Qwustenuxun speaking peoples have to offer to this conversation. And as my colleagues and fellow presenters have mentioned and alluded to, the lands and the landscapes and the forests tell the story of this place where we are here. And not only tell the story of this place, but tell the story of each of us who are connected to this place. And I'm constantly reminded of the words of my late friend and colleague, Joey Caro. And in speaking about the territory, he spoke about how we are so connected to it. He talked about the fact that we can't look at Peepalm or Mount Zuhela and not think of the flood and the frog story. That we can't look or go to the mouth of the Cowichan River and not think about the killer whale and the thunderbird story. That we can't be here in the shadow of the Coxsila Ridge and not think of our first ancestor, Sialipsa, and think of his journey throughout the territory and the teachings and the experiences that he had. And we can't look at Swahas, Mount Provo, and not see the profile, literally, written in the landscape of our ancestor Stz'uminus, and think of his stories and his connection and our subsequent connection to those places. And in thinking about the literal footprint of our ancestors on this land, we recognize that the Island Hokkien speaking peoples were the first legal practitioners of law in this territory today. And they weren't lawless when those first settlers arrived. They were living in organized society. They had norms and values and practices that regulated their behavior and their relationship with one another and with land, and helped them resolve.
Recording in progress.
And those laws still exist today for the whole community of Stz'uminus. And those laws still continue to have relevance today. And as I said, we can look across the landscape and we can see those laws literally written in the land around us. But the land also tells of another history and of another legal footprint on this territory. And I always say, like, the inn and railway itself is like stitches across Vancouver Island and represents like a deep cut or a sharp fissure in the territory. And these colonial laws and their effects are also evident in the landscapes around us when we, see the sites of clear cutting, when we smell the pollution in our water, in our waterways, and it serves to remind us that colonial law or Western legal thought has cast a deep shadow over our Hulkmeanan legal traditions. But that doesn't mean those legal traditions have disappeared. As we heard today from all three of these speakers, and as I can attest to, those laws still continue to have relevance and provide guidance and help with decision-making in Hulkmeanan families and communities today. We talk often of our Stz'uminus that guides us. And Stz'uminus is a Hulkmeanan word that has many glosses in the English language. Some people refer to it as teachings. Some people talk about our way of being on Mother Earth or our way of living a good life. And when I started to do this work and have conversations with elders about our laws, they'd sit and sort of mull about what I was asking them. And I was like, it was years and years ago, and my interview skills probably weren't that great, so that was on me. And they'd say, okay, I think what you're talking about is our Stz'uminus. But it's not just law. Like, it touches on all aspects of our life. Like, there's Stz'uminus in our language, in our cooking practices, in our sacred bathing sites. Like, it's all around us. But there are certain aspects to it that are legal in nature. And so when I think about our Stz'uminus, or when I think about laws, I think about, like, what are those guiding teachings? Or when I write it, I talk about, guiding legal principles that help inform what our laws should be, so that when we draft a law, and those laws reflect those teachings that emanate from our Stz'uminus, then we're living a good life, and we're being in good relations with one another. So our laws create sort of this state of Stz'uminus. And so we need to think about what are the teachings around this territory that we're in here now, and what are the teachings in relation to sustainable forests, and how do we sort of draw that law out? And one of my dear friends, colleagues, mentors, John Burroughs, wrote a book called Canada's Indigenous Constitution. But in this book, he talks about the fact that there are sort of 5 sources of Indigenous law. And lots of us have been his students, and we all try to come up with more sources, but he really knows his stuff. And there's really these 5 sources that he has come up with that resonates in all of our work. And we heard about some of them today, especially when Shanahan was speaking. But there are sacred sources of Indigenous law, and I've found that there are sacred sources in Qwustenuxun law as well. So when Qwustenuxun was sharing the health stories, there's laws to be drawn from those stories about how we regulate our relations with one another. And there's standards to be drawn from those stories when we think about, what was happening in those stories when individuals were transformed, and for what reason. What laws can we draw from those experiences? There's laws that come from our first ancestor stories, when we think about those who dropped and fell from the sky, and we think about their experiences on the territory, and we think about the relationship to certain places or to individuals. We can draw from those experiences insight into how to regulate our lives, our relation with one another. Individuals, Shannon also shared his son's almost net, and how, so his Hokuminum name, and how for his family, that creates certain obligations and relationships because they carry that ancestral name. The same is similar for individuals who share those ancestral names of those first ancestors who dropped from the sky. They have certain obligations and rights with respect to the places where those ancestors visited and had interactions and so forth. So there's laws that we can derive about this territory and this landscape by thinking about those sacred sources of Hokuminum laws. There's also natural sources of law, and Professor Burroughs describes this as laws that we can glean from observing nature around us. And I loved the story of the genealogy of the trees, right? Like there's laws to be drawn from that in thinking about what does that teach us, about the willow or about the cedar and our obligations and standards in respect of that. And not only our natural laws, like not only do the trees teach us about sustainability of trees or relationship with trees, but the trees and objects in the natural world can also teach us more about our relationships with one another and how to be in good relationship with one another. Professor Burroughs shared a story and talked about how in his language, he's Anishinaabe, there's a word, and I can't remember it in Ojibwe, but for when that time of the year when the freeze starts to melt, so the earth becomes a little bit less frozen, the snow starts to recede or the ice starts to recede and soften and sort of new life forms. And he says that that's the word that they use for dispute resolution in their community, because you need to soften your hard feelings for new relationships and new growth to happen. And so it's not, like we don't just look to the world around us to think about our relationship to the world around us. We learn from the world around us how to be in good relationship with one another. So caring for and sustaining the forest is not only beneficial to the forest, but beneficial to us as well, as we'll lose knowledge in that way. There's deliberative sources of laws. So laws that stem from dialogue with one another. And scholars, Val Napoleon and John have often mentioned that deliberation usually occurs in all aspects of these sources of law, that rarely in an Indigenous community would one person be stating the law and everyone following it, that these take place through conversation, ensuring that the right people are in the room. The late Willie Seymour shared a story with me about a deliberative process that he witnessed when he was a little boy. And he said he was on the beach with his grandfather, at Shell Beach, like Lady Smith area. And he just remembers like somebody coming up to his grandfather and saying something. And he said, and his grandfather told him to like go get his drum. So he ran home and got his drum, brought it back to his grandfather. And he said he beat on his drum like 3 times. And that was like the signal in the community that there's an important thing, question, or a decision that needs to be made. Pretty soon everyone started gathering at the longhouse, and they like lit the fire and got to work in the kitchen to get food, and they sent the young kids like to sort of be as runners, to be like, okay, we need this person here to help us resolve this conflict. Go make sure that they're here. Go make sure that they're there. And he remembered, they just start having a conversation, trying to work through this hard problem. And he said he remembered sometimes they would go like all through the night, and if they were not able to resolve it, and they thought, someone in the next village over, we should really have that person there. They would have some good insight. They'd send runners out to make sure the right people were there. He said they just talked it through until they came to a consensus. And it doesn't mean that it meant everybody was okay with the end result because the process was good, not necessarily that everyone thought that was the right answer to the question. And they'd go around and make sure everybody was okay with the decision, and then they appoint some people to help make sure the decision was implemented. And they said, but from this point forward, we put this issue to rest. It's now a private matter between those individuals, and we're not going to talk about it in the community after this. So, these deliberative processes are really important in Indigenous communities, and it's not only about making sure that a conversation is had, but it's how that conversation takes place and who is in the room when that conversation is taking place, and the respect shown to individuals as that conversation is occurring, and ensuring that the decision made through those deliberative processes is followed up on, and there's accountability in that to preserve and maintain these relationships. There's also positivistic types of law in Indigenous communities, and today we might see those in BCRs with band council resolutions, but they're usually, declarations made by CMs or individuals who people respect their authority and believe that they have the knowledge to make certain types of decisions. And then customary practices, right? That's mostly when people think of Indigenous law, they think of the customary practices, but that's just one aspect. But those legal mechanisms and legal processes that are seen as valid and legitimate because they've taken place for years, since time immemorial. So we see these different sources of law, and we need to think critically about this issue of sustainable forests in relation to the whole communal legal tradition, and drawing out laws and principles and processes from Indigenous sources of law and thinking about how we work through this. So, you know, in work that I have done, and right now I'm doing a bit of research on land, and specifically how the fact that most of the traditional territory of the Ho'oponopono Treaty Group is in the hand of private forest lands creates issues for Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people as well, I would argue. But I've been thinking about that, and I've been trying to think about what are principles that emanate from our Stz'uminus, from Ho'oponopono legal orders that could help us to determine standards and processes to govern both jurisdiction over land and sustainable resource management in those areas. And so that's like a big project and beyond the scope of this discussion tonight, but I will say that we have heard some of those principles in the discussion today, early on. We've heard talk about relationality and kinship, and what does it mean to be in relationship to the land around us, to our more than human relatives. What does it mean to be in good relation with Ho'oponopono and non-Ho'oponopono people as we think about our the fact that we are all connected, that our futures are intertwined. The principle of respect. Whenever I talk to the elders about our Stz'uminus and teachings that should guide and inform our practices, respect is always at the forefront. And so what does it mean to create laws that respect or show respect or give respect to our more than human relatives? What does it mean to show respect or create processes that foster respect between Ho'oponopono and non-Ho'oponopono individuals? You know, sharing and support is another principle that we see emanated through our Stz'uminus. The responsibility, or this notion that the late Roy Edwards talked about tapes of water. Like when you help one another, you help yourself, right? This idea that, you know, we need to support one another because as we strengthen each other, we strengthen our community. And how does that translate into sustainable forest practices, or what are principles or standards or regulations that we could create that then would foster that type of understanding or principle? And then finally, what can we learn from the Ho'oponopono legal tradition about decision-making processes, whether they're collaborative or consensus building or recognizing CM. There were different processes that were used to resolve different types of disputes, but they all operated in a way that upheld or maintained Stz'uminus. So how can we learn from how Ho'oponopono people resolve disputes or continue to resolve disputes in a way that helps us to tackle this big issue, which arguably requires collaboration to solve in and of its own. I talk about legal entanglement because this territory is entangled. Like, none of us are going anywhere. We're all here to stay, as they say in Delaware. So we need to think critically and creatively about what do we want our future relationship to look like. And arguably, Canadian law has not done a very good job at resolving that issue for us. But Indigenous peoples have a long history of working with other nations. You know, like our legal tradition is not the same as the Quw'utsun legal tradition. Our legal tradition is not the same as the Tonga legal tradition. But we were able to respect that legal pluralism and able to create processes to live together and share territory and share access to resources and work together to maintain the health of the environment. And so I'm just saying, or sort of, I want to end in saying, like, as we think about this difficult issue that in this territory is very difficult for non-Indigenous and Indigenous people to work through, as we have a really unique situation created by the ENN Railway grant that we don't see in anywhere else in Canada, that we need to draw on all available legal mechanisms to help us work through this in a good way, and the starting place should be the legal tradition of the Hokkien communities. So, it's interesting.
Thank you all, for speaking with us. We're at 8:45 now, so I think maybe do people want to take a quick few-minute break to stretch and go to the washroom? Okay, so why don't we do that and reconvene in a few minutes? The time is now 9:47, so maybe by 5 minutes or so, 5 to 7 minutes, we can 8:47. Sorry, 8:47. Is everyone okay with that? Maybe going a little bit over our speakers. Yeah. I can stay till maybe 2 after. I'll just sister to bring the kids to me. That will save 5 or 10 minutes, yeah. Okay.
For your morning, shut your 2 minutes.
Yeah, I know, the 5-year-old.
So I think there are washrooms in the back if anybody needs to take a bio break. And students. Okay, thank you all for sitting down. We only have about 15 minutes or so, or even less. So I'll now invite the audience members to ask any questions that they might have. Yeah. Yes, you did.
Oh, sorry, I was actually just leaving.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I've been following the Six Nations Mountains process for a few years now, and I understand that the Cowichan Nation is involved in negotiations with North Cowichan municipality, and I understand that that's a confidential process, naturally, to develop a management strategy. Is there anybody that can speak to that?
I can. And not for confidentiality reasons. That
Yes, Bernie.
So I think Forestry practices and grants for the so-called crown land, we actually push BC government to the rights of Indigenous peoples with this issue. 18.5% of this island is controlled by mosaic forestry management. And much of the mosaic is owned by, well, it's all owned by pension companies.
Yeah.
And the biggest one is BC Investment Corporation, something like that. So how can you put pressure on BC Investment Corporation to stop mosaic from really ravaging that 80% of the island? They are enforcing forests that are only 40 or 50 years old. And there's no chance for the forest ever to go from being a carbon emitter to a carbon sink. And this is a big problem because it's been, in 2002 is the last time Canadian managed forests, including BC managed forests, were net carbon sinks, the carbon emitters system. So what can we do to put pressure on BC investment to cause the state to go down ecologically oriented forestry?
I will
At least from a
say,
legal perspective.
yeah, from a legal perspective, so I'm working on a project right now with the Health Freedom Tree Group is part of that project. It's a SSHRC-funded project. Sarah Wagner at Osgood and my teachers at the University of Toronto, and that is what we are trying to figure out. Trying to deal with the private managed forest land in the territory and coming up with different options. And one of the things that we're turning our mind to, and granted, COVID put a damper on the work of this project just because we couldn't meet in person and have these types of conversations. We're just actually starting now, and we're going to have a workshop in June where we're trying to think of how to tackle this problem from all areas. Like, we're realizing it's not what we're not going to find a magic solution to private managed forest lands. Although they are, I mean, they were doing revisions to that act, and we did submit a paper to that talking about how we think it requires more regulation. But I will share one story now. I forget when this was happening, but when the private managed forest companies, I forget what year, they were going to start subdividing some of that land and selling it off, and the Freedom Tree Group put out like a press release talking about how this was like a violation of Aboriginal title and our right to property and right to culture under international human rights law. And it got picked up by like international journals, and like there was people like stockbrokers from like New York calling because it was sort of like unsettling the stocks in those companies, and they did dip for a while, but then they came back up again. So it's like how to do sustained public outreach or things like that. We're trying to turn our minds to that, but that's one of the questions that we're trying to grapple with.
So how we as citizens and work with Cowichan Tribes, for example, we putting pressure, because BC Investment Corporation, as I understand it, most of the boards are funded by government. So again, how can we put pressure on the government to change the attitude of BC Investment Corporation?
What if we make new jobs? Like the ones that people go in and steward the land and take the forest and pick the trees and don't love them all, but just take the ones that go to make the forest grow bigger and stronger.
Yeah.
Those would be good ideas.
Yes.
But how do you get those people to listen to that?
Yeah.
But I think this, I mean, like it's events like tonight, and it's like support like this that I think will actually affect change. Like, we need non-Indigenous, non-cultured people to see the flaws in the Western legal system as well, and to start using those avenues to push forward. doing this work of revitalizing Indigenous law or bringing it out of the shadow is hard work for Indigenous communities with a lot of issues going on in our communities at, on all fronts, social and economic. And so to do this hard work of coming out from the shadow and thinking critically about our own legal systems and the laws that should govern and help us assert jurisdiction in this territory, all while trying to attack colonial legal systems is exhausting and like beyond our capabilities. And so we need strong advocates and allies to work with us, and we need to create spaces and places for more of that dialogue.
And we, who are interested citizens, would find mechanisms that we can work with.
Yes.
Because it's not just logging and having participation in biodiversity, but it's affecting water.
Yes.
So the big problem with the Qwustenuxun River is logging in the upper watershed, because you get more flashes, flow, more river flow, less absorption of first flow, the rains, and more moisture to release in the sun. So we're looking to partners to try to get that pressure.
And I will also say too, like, I definitely agree, like, don't, like, always have those conversations with Indigenous communities, but also don't wait for Indigenous communities to come to you for the solutions. Like, let's think creatively with the knowledge and systems that you're familiar with, and then bring those to Indigenous communities to get them to endorse or find support. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking back on that. I've completely lost faith in governments being willing to change. So my suggestion and invitation for a question would be, it's got to start from the bottom up. And it's sort of being a steward of 2.5 acres here in the bay and trying to restore it back to the land it was, but it can't be. This has been mentioned, it's been logged with this tree on areas and years old. But I want to do it in right relation, but I don't know what that pathway is. So I'm curious what would be a way to co-manage a restoration project to be one of many patchwork ones that become the examples, hopefully, that eventually become the patchwork to be the infrastructure to change it like that. Because I personally don't believe that our target can be the top. It's got to be from the bottom up. It's where my heart is right now, so I'm inviting assistance in understanding what co-management might look like in budget restoration.
We can't change systems. You have to really try to talk that way you said. But what I've realized in these years is that we are able to change the humans that are on the side of that. Why is it that individuals that do not live here are ones that are chosen to lead these systems? When will they walk away? When will they find the animals that walk through the good effects? The reality is that we can change each other. It's a lot easier when we can change it. When you ask about how to co-manage, I was just referencing this earlier. We are 4% of the population of the Aboriginals here, and we have undergone at least
7 generations of incredible trauma. So you're asking how these individuals, are able to help, and what we heard here is that we need everybody to work on their own as well as working together. So I imagine is that remove the grass. Okay, like the majority of the lawns here are actually high trees. Then there's what's it called, the reed grass everywhere. It is not, like our grass. Like when you're up in the woods, there's no grass. The only time that we had grass was in our oak meadows. But we let shows where they were, all these things. But then a lot of the municipalities, they want you to have a lawn, and they want you to have all these things exactly like this and that. We can change that. If we can change the way that we live here, and we can explain why, then the ones the ones that have the opportunity to change things up top will have no choice. If everybody else is already changing, it's like the reality that in the 1960s, like Indigenous individuals, we had to ride on the lower decks of the easy ferries. And everybody thought, oh, that's just the way things are. But over the years, everybody agreed. Everyone began to realize that that was wrong. And over the years, they had to change the rules because everyone realized it was wrong. As it is now, the majority of individuals, they don't realize what's actually happening. That the woods used to hold the water and the life. They don't. So when the river triples in size in 24 hours, and they blamed it, and said, it wasn't all. We don't yet have. Not everybody has organized. So if we're able to share with you here, you can share this with if everybody here shares everything they heard with one individual, right, it will eventually expect, and exactly as we heard. We need help for a very small amount of the population. So if we could ask you guys, to help everybody else, we would wake up. The end result is this. You have to change.
If I can speak to that just for a second, I'm saying, right? So we hear about we need to spread the word out and get the bottom up running, but there is changes that we can make at the top. So Justin Trudeau himself got into power by talking about moving to a proportional representation system instead of first past the post that was designed when information moved at the speed of a horse. So nowadays they can actually leverage the speed of that, the information flow against everybody, because they've got artificial intelligence now where they can actually have that scan of population and know exactly basically what words to say at the right time to get people to vote certain ways. And so until we can get something like proportional representation in place, I would like to see citizens' assemblies tied to that security, which is, I think, a lot like what how the Longhouse worked. I don't have any experience with it, but I've done a lot of study over the last 10 months that I'm advocating actually for the rail to be restored. But I think that is where we need to concentrate on, is get rid, like, first of all, first past the post is one of the least used systems of government worldwide now. So places like Finland and Australia and all these other places are now using some form of proportional representation. And if you look at their countries, you don't see all this divisive, like this harshly divisive politics that we see online. Like, I literally, if I was a corporation and these politicians work for me, I'd fire every one of them. Like, if my staff behave the way that they do, I would, well, I can't fire them in the government, but so I have to work with them and get them all, working. And my team has been doing very well because, management style has to be from the heart, and it has to be all inclusive. You can't be, edged into one thing. And the problem is our government's tax system is based on fuel, gas, and oil. If you follow all of the tax funds, the transit funds, and everything else, it all goes back to oil and gas. And that's never going to change until there's something like a citizens' assembly, which is to disconnect the, it's to solve the principal agent problem, where, all that.
That's enough. There's a person here who's been waiting a long time for a question.
Oh, sure, you can.
But I would like such a gift, and Sarah, it's okay if you have to go. I'm here to speak and challenge the people who have listened to the Indigenous teaching tonight. So my name is Kim Barnard. I'm a Ukrainian settler ancestry. So you can understand now when I say that one person building relationships, building coalitions, building collaborations across the globe, in carrying that grief and struggle to survive, that is the answer, is to build those relationships. So I'm keenly interested in the whole community teaching to hear here. I know that's a primary teaching, and the word pictures that we heard represent a time when humans weren't drowning in stuff, weren't leaving their invasive litter and garbage everywhere, to pollute our waterways, to harm our habitats, to harm our wildlife and disrupt everything, including the necessary relationships in Americans that people need to survive in, and for families to thrive in. And so my question would be, how can we, in a trauma-informed way, build those relationships and remove the stigma of he said, she said, and who's not doing your part, and actually call each other to the very best way, the very best feeling of how to walk gently on this earth and to really respect one another and respect the resources that we've been given, because I see in the pattern of bad behavior, there's just a despair. It's in our youngsters, it's in our people who just don't care anymore and just treat the land with disrespect, whether it's cigarette butts everywhere or whether it's construction debris and other things like those burn piles that Christine referred to with grief, that we see the scars that we've left in the land, those deep cuts. How can we fix this together? Across cultures, across backgrounds, I carry that grief. It doesn't have to be built in the way it's there. It's happening.
Whether we like it or not, we are all together. I think what's happened is that everything used to be all of our food is free. All of our houses were free. Everywhere you wanted to travel, you were allowed. And you could walk where you wanted to go. You could ride a canoe. You could eat what was on the edge of the ocean. You could eat what was in the river. You were never hungry. How, like many out there, like actually like are hungry right now. How many? Thousands. How, like many of them, like they don't have a home. Thousands. There was nobody here that was hungry before. Nobody here that like this illness. Everybody worked together, and there were always conflicts. It wasn't always the forces here. But the reality is that we, as this like new world, we don't even really know what that's like. How can you even try to imagine that you would always have a house when I don't even know. I think everybody that I hang out with, they rent houses, so anybody actually has a house. But we're all so occupied trying to have enough to eat, have a house, that we don't realize that it's free, and that the work we do hurts as well as what's. I wear these. I wear this. I drove here today. All that, all this hurts, all this land. We should all be wearing, the textiles, that are here. I ask all the time, why is a chicken cheaper than a salmon? Where is the chicken from? Where's the salmon from? Why do we invest all this in the chicken that's not from here, but we choose not to invest in what was here? The reality is that if we chose to reinvest in what was here, then it would all actually be free. And that is something that we should strive to, yet it really feels like the unattainable wish. Child says, oh, Dad, I want to be an astronaut. You say, oh, that's great. It's the same with this. You're like, oh yeah, that would be nice, Derek, pat on the head. Less than 200 years ago. Less than 200 years ago, everything here was free. There was no charge in order to survive. And I think the way that we need to begin to work together, with all this, is to try to recreate a world where everything is free. The example, that I have of that is that when mothers, right out when they were young, a lot of them will reference that in the rear of the longhouse, there was one hammer. It's always on the wall at the back of the room. Anyone that needed a hammer, it was there. It's, oh yeah, it's over there. And after you used it, you hung it up. And there's hundreds of individuals in that house. One hammer. And for years, for generations, there's one hammer. Only in the last 50 years did we leave the longhouse. When we left, the hammer there. And now we all have a hammer. We all have watches, we all have hats, we all have everything. We don't need it. We just need that one hammer in the longhouse. That we all have need have to like change like the idea that we can all have just one hammer and that's all right. We don't all have to have all of them. That's all I got.
Kathy? Oh no, sorry, it wasn't Kathy, I'm sorry. You're behind Kathy, yeah.
I'd love to say something positive. It's not really a question, that's okay. Just for the people here that are like asking what they can do. I have 2 young children, who are in elementary school here in the Cowichan Valley. And they have a great privilege of having Indigenous education in their school. And they I have just seen such amazing things come out of this program. And we have some cousins that live up in Portland who do not have this privilege. And watching my kids and the way that they will advocate for like the earth and forest and talk to adults and other kids, and they're starting from the bottom up, right? Like it really does give me hope, right? So if we can, leave here and tell one person about what we've learned and be advocates and do the work and be the people, just like these kids in these schools, like, and it's not just my kids, like it's all the kids in these elementary school are so passionate and they love going into nature and into the forest, and they love telling everybody about what they've learned. And like just, I'm so thankful for Indigenous education because like here you are. I've done it on my own, and yeah, just there is hope. Like honestly, like we're all here saying like what can we do, and yeah, I think that the kids really are like a shining light showing us that we can do better. And you just have to be brave enough to like, when you see something happening, right? Like, we were up in Courtney with her cousins and they were running through the woods, just pulling the moss off the trees and the ferns. And my daughter was like, you can't do that, that's alive. And like, it took courage, right? Like her cousin just thought about it and it's like, oh, well, that's so silly. And she's like, it's not silly, that hurts me, that hurts my heart, and that hurts the forest. And her cousin was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Right? Like, so, anyway, I just wanted to say something positive.
And if we can use our influence to serve in places where we can form policy, we can be, voices for advocacy and respect. That's, I think, what we're called.
Kathy, and maybe I'll just take one more question and we'll close out in the interest of time. I'm sure we could be here all night, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I might suggest following Dr. Shannon's suggestion about people at the table. We are all here in the community because we all believe in the basic principles that we can present. At the table, we're missing the loggers, we're missing the registered conventional foresters. We're missing government representatives on every level. We need to be talking to these people and inviting them into the circle. And so I would like to suggest that perhaps to begin seriously directing that and inviting these people into the process.
Any parting thoughts from each of you?
To say, like in terms of like the things that we could do and go and spread messages about what we learned here today, I guess, just coming from health system is a bit of chaos right now, which I'm sure a lot of you have maybe experienced, experience. But it's amongst government, it's a big area. It has a lot of money. It has more money in many cases than some environmental programs, or we've just seen with COVID that everything can stop on a dime and things change when the health system is under threat. And I think just one of the ways I'm trying to, in my system, colonial system, try and bring some of that change or transformation, or like, how to look at this differently is like our forests are our health system, our watersheds are our health system, and we need to put as much focus there as anywhere else. So yeah, just some thoughts for maybe people to think about when they're having some of these conversations.
Funny for me. A lot of people know me here. It's Grandma Osa. I was sharing, that, I've been doing a lot of work with the Fairy Creek watershed, and for the last few months, I've been talking to a lot of people that wanted to get reconnected to the land. And I've been talking with a lot of people one-on-one, offering some support. But the best thing that people could do when it comes to working with many different nationalities is give us the time and the space. Us Indigenous people, I come from Pla'amin. And my family, has, deep-rooted connections to the land, to the logging industry, to the fishing, culturally, with colonialism, the ties were severed with myself and my blood family. But over the years, I still knew within my DNA what I was supposed to do. I'm still connected to the land. And over the last few months, I've been talking with a lot of the people who've been wanting to go back to Fairy Creek and get reconnected to the land. And I've talked to them about the healing process, getting their hands dirty, giving back to the land instead of taking it. We stop taking from the land. It doesn't matter where we're at. When I drove around here today, it was like really heart-wrenching, because I seen the destruction that the Shawnigan Basin out there and the implementation of the land. It was just open. I've been around here since the 1980s, living in Victoria, aka Victoria, and I've seen all the changes. And what I have not seen yet is the uprising of the Indigenous people. The reasons why we're not seeing it is that the colonial system has oppressed us. They're starving us right now, taking our children, taking our resources. And so, it's like, okay, so now we're at that, that junction of it. Some people want to hear from us. And, there's also a few people that don't want to hear from us. They don't want to hear from us because our sepia is what is guiding us. And there's a severe disconnect between our heart and blood. And there's a few people that see the connections, and they're realizing that our government, our corporations, they want to take the last 2.7% of the old growth from Fairy Creek. But then it's not just Fairy Creek. I've seen the destruction in the Cowichan River. I've seen the disasters along the Malahat, and the streams came down. And, so it's pretty well everywhere, right? And I started to remind people that, it's next one. All of us need to come together and come with land. But it should not be left up to the Indigenous people by themselves to clean up the mess that was made by another nation. We're like small children. When you have little ones, 2, 3 years old, and then you teach them to clean up. Well, it's time for the government and the rest of society to come together and clean up the mess. And that means getting us, Indigenous people, involved in every level of government, from chief and council to municipal to provincial and federal.
And we need the support, not just on voting day, not just when there's a treaty to be negotiated. Every day. Stand up and stand with us. And you're not going to do anything when you stand with us and get over the way, but you're going to do something. So that's what we need to do. It's a call to action right now. Just do it. Just stand up. There's a few allies here that have stood. Have stood with a few of us at Fair Creek, have stood with us on the highways when, there was this issue every Tuesday at Goldstream. There's the silo people and cycling who are going up to the highways because they're worried about the trees and the disruption that is creating a new route for the salmon that are running through Goldstream Park. Well, every Tuesday. One person out there hearing and singing. Doesn't disrupt the topic. It just makes people aware. We put a call out about 10 days ago in Christ for some of the land defenders to come and support them. And a few of us did go out. And how he's done it is social media, word of mouth, and how the land defenders have responded is that we choose to respect the Indigenous West. Like we did with the people like we did with the people from the Impact Nations. So, respect, respond to like others, voting, support us. So, anyhow, that's not my OSIS words for the moment. If you had 2 minutes, I want to go
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming here today. I think we've all been given a lot of food for thought and a lot to think about in how we can move forward from this evening. Hopefully, we can take some of those lessons and apply them into our daily lives, and we can sure Shawnigan Basin Society and the BC Coalition Institute will also be vehicles to move through as we go through this process. I thank you very much to our speakers. Well, I think has gone, but I'm wondering, Dan, if you can close us out in a good way. That would be wonderful.
The Indigenous perspectives. Everybody here is Indigenous from somewhere. And wherever that is, your ancestors also used to look after the land. That's why you're here. That's why you have survived. Only very recently that we have all been convinced that that was not the case. This is not about trying to help like Indigenous people. This is about everybody remembering how to look after the land, and that if you can look within yourselves, there are those wisdom of your ancestors is actually there as well. So you don't just have to ask us; it's also within you. So I'd like to end with our prayer song, for future generations. They're Stz'uminus, I guess. Qwustenuxun Qwustenuxun